parents do things, but
So, so the day after Veronica died, we had to go to the mortuary, and of course, we were preparing everything. We were preparing everything that needed to be done, the paperwork, of course, and of course, all the death certificate that had been prepared. And you know, the thing about that is, it was all very surreal to me. It was, I felt very, I felt like I was in a dream. I was hoping that this was all not going to be real. But it was all very real. It was just wishful thinking on my part, of course. But the reason I felt that way is that I had just buried my mother. She had died practically 1 month prior. She had died of cancer. So I was in the same mortuary that I had been in 1 month prior with my, you know, of course, then I had been in there with my brothers and my sisters, and I was paying for the services to have my mother buried. So again, to be back there again and doing this with for my daughter, it was surreal. And I kept thinking to myself, how does this happen? Not again. How can I be going through this again? How can this be happening to me again? I was disassociated. I was just completely taken away from the moment. I mean, you could have burned my fingers with a cigarette lighter, and I wouldn't have noticed. I was that detached from the moment. But I would look all around the room that I was in with the funeral director, and I remember thinking, I was just here only a month ago. I couldn't understand it. But we spoke to the funeral director, and when we sat down, we said, we're here to cremate my daughter. We had decided that we were going to cremate Veronica. And the funeral director, of course, he was very understanding and very sympathetic as he's getting out his paperwork. And he asked how old Veronica was. And we told him she just celebrated her 11th birthday. And the funeral director stopped. He was looking down at the paperwork, and he stopped and just looked up at us. And I remember he stammered, his voice stammered a little bit. And he looked at us and he says, "I'm so sorry." And he goes, "You should know, we don't charge for children. We're not going to charge you anything to cremate your daughter." And in retrospect, I really don't remember how I reacted. I think I was just so numb that I just nodded my head. I had enough sense to say thank you, but that was it. If I was doing anything like crying or being upset, I don't remember. I sincerely don't remember. I wish I did. But he said that it wouldn't take long, of course. Veronica's body was already there from the night before. And that's the thing. That's the thing about it, isn't it? I mean, when you experience this, something like this sort of tragedy, everything is parsed for you. Everything is separated, and it's not like you're having to deliver the body to the mortuary yourself. It's all taken care of for you. And you know, we can say, well, that's because it's a service that's provided to you, and that's true. But there's also this element of disassociation. And perhaps that's what you need. Perhaps that's what you need to do so that you're not having to worry about losing it. There's enough that's going to happen in your life and in these moments, in these next few days, that you're going to lose it. And you don't need the help of something else to get in the way of that. I don't know, I'm spitballing when I say that, but it's certainly how I felt. But sure enough, they had cremated her. We had selected an urn. It was a lovely ceramic urn. And I don't remember if we got it back the same day or if we came back. It's interesting how stuff like that, you can't seem to remember. And again, perhaps it's just a reflective, a protective reflex. All I remember is all of a sudden we had Veronica's urn with her ashes in it. And if anyone is wondering, no, I didn't open it up and look. Quite frankly, at the time, that never occurred to me to be curious about and to want to do that. I just took it on faith that they were there. And not since, not after. There was never a point where I decided, you know, I really need to look at these ashes of my daughter. It would have been too much for me. I don't think I would have been strong enough to want to try. But we had the ashes. We were going to have a funeral service. And I asked the priest, my family priest, whom I had known growing up in our church, who had since retired. And I asked him if he would do the funeral mass. We had spoken to friends and family, of course. We had notified Veronica's school, her elementary school, and my coworkers, and of course people that I knew growing up in church. They were all there. They all wanted to attend. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful service. But still, we sat up front, and Veronica's ashes were there in front of the church altar. And I still felt this degree of disassociation, like I was completely apart from this. I was watching. It was more like I was a spectator instead of a participant. And after the service, I remember walking down to the church office, and there was family and friends down there. They were chatting and small talking and generally having a nice time. And I remember trying to smile. I remember trying to put on a face of, despite the tragedy, this is good. This is good to see everyone here and old friends. I was trying to put up this front. I remember I was spending a lot of energy doing this, and I wasn't completely successful at it. But still, we had done this event. We had been with everyone, and I remember how everyone was so nice to me, and they were all so polite. And no one really knew what to say. There's the typical condolences, the typical platitudes that you always hear, of course, when someone dies. But it's like no one knows what to say when a child dies. Everyone is quiet. No one has a frame of reference. It's so unusual. It's so out of the ordinary. It's like they say, your children are supposed to outlive you. But the next day, we had gone and we had buried Veronica in the church cemetery. We had paid to have her buried at the foot of my mom's grave. And it was just me and Veronica's mom and, well, Veronica. It was a cold day. I remember it was chilly. But it was just us. And I remember we had brought Veronica's favorite toy, one of her favorite toys. It was a little toy teddy bear, a stuffed teddy bear. And the caretakers, of course, they had been gracious enough to prep the grave for us, to open up the foot of my mom's and stepdad's grave. And they had prepared everything for us. So we had this quiet little ceremony with our priest. And we set Veronica's urn in the ground with her doll, the little stuffed teddy bear. And I remember we had thought to bring a Tupperware bowl, the largest Tupperware bowl that we could find in the house. And we used that to place on top of the urn and the teddy bear to sort of protect everything. It just seemed like something that needed to be done. And I remember thinking, this is good. This makes sense. And we each went home. And that was it. She had been buried. And we were okay with that. And I'm sorry, I have to backpedal. I have to back up because it just occurred to me. And I'm sorry about this, that I'm only now remembering this, but once we had Veronica's urn from the funeral directors, we didn't bury her right away. We kept Veronica's urn at home. It's like we were not completely sure what we were going to do. That's it. We were still making the plans. And that's when we decided, okay, we're going to go ahead and bury Veronica with my mom. But so Veronica's urn was in the house. And it was surreal. It was so unusual to have that there, because again, it's out of the norm. It's not something you see every day in your home, and I guess for some people that is. But remember, we're talking my story, so this was news to me. I had no clue. So again, to go back forward, we finally decided, okay, we're going to bury Veronica. And we had a beautiful tombstone made for her. It looked like a bench. And it listed her name. And it listed the year she was born and the year she died. But it had her full name. And it was just gorgeous. A simple granite bench tombstone. And then we set some flowers, some beautiful flowers, in the vases that they provide you there at the cemetery. But so after that cold day, like I said, it was a cold, chilly afternoon, late morning, early afternoon. We finally buried her, and there's supposed to be closure. People say, well, you had the funeral, and at least now there's closure. You can start the process of healing, and that's not true. That's when the healing is only getting started. But first, you have to go through more of that vicious pain, and believe me, I was feeling lots of it. I was doing what I do best whenever I'm feeling pain. I was pretending it didn't exist. I was hiding from it, and I was moving on the outside. And on the inside, I was losing it completely. And I didn't care. I didn't care about anything. I mentioned before that that disassociation you feel. And that's what I was feeling, was that I just didn't care. I didn't care about my marriage. I didn't care about paying the bills. I just didn't care about anything. The only thing that mattered to me in my mind was I knew I was going to die soon. Because all I wanted in my heart and in my mind was to be with my Veronica again. In heaven, in the afterlife. Because I could not see and understand why I would possibly want to live a life here without her. I just didn't care. But I didn't kill myself. It just wasn't something that I wanted to do. I don't know. Maybe I was still trying to figure out how. Maybe I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do or how I wanted to do it. But it didn't happen. At least not right away. In fact, I would try, but it wouldn't be for several years. But in the meantime, I was doing most anything to not think about her death. I was looking for things to do that would, in fact, it would fill the gap. All sorts of things. I won't go into those details because frankly it doesn't matter. It's not something I'm ready to tell. But whatever I could do to fill that grief, to fill that pain and stop gap it, it seemed like a good idea to me. And as far as living was concerned, I really wasn't. I wasn't living at all. Life was happening around me. I wasn't taking part in it. Again, I couldn't have cared less. I was just living. I was going through the process day in and day out. Living. Smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, getting drunk, not giving a damn, not the least bit concerned about what I might be doing to other people or how I might be affecting them. That just never occurred to me. So those are probably the ugly facets of grief that people don't talk about. I don't know, maybe they do. But again, this was all news to me, and there was no manual. I didn't know how I was supposed to behave. I only knew how I was reacting. By pretending to be numb and trying desperately to not think about things or anyone. I would go to work, but people would try to be sympathetic to me. They'd be very nice to me, and sometimes I was rude. I was rude back to them because it was if I felt that if I was rude, then I wouldn't have to talk about it. I wouldn't have to say anything. And that worked for a little bit. You know, of course, people who have not experienced, losing a child, they don't know what to say. They don't know what to say to you. So if I was giving them an out from the conversation, they'd look at me, they'd be confused, but they'd be, okay, Paul, if you need anything, you let us know. And I'd be, oh, sure, I will. Thank you. Thank you for asking. But I simply didn't care. And it's interesting because I remember one of my coworkers, she talked to me once. One day I was on my way into the office, and she caught me in the parking lot. And she held my hand, and she looked deep into my eyes, and she said, "Paul, I am so sorry." She says, "I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So the only thing I can say is I'm so sorry." And that was probably the most genuine and the most heartfelt thing anyone has ever told me about Veronica. And I remember that was probably the first time that I had ever let up my guard, the first time I had ever dropped the walls. And I told her thank you. I told her thank you so much for that. It made me feel better. It really did. And you know, I don't think I ever told her. I mean, I don't think I ever went back to her and said, you know what you said, remember when you said this and did that? I don't think I ever went back and said anything more about that. I wish I had. Unfortunately, I have no idea where she's at these days, and quite frankly, and I'm ashamed to say this, I don't remember her name. She was a sweet person. She did IT work for us. And please excuse me because I'm rambling here, and I'm telling this story as I remember it, as events happen. And perhaps one of the most important events that I want to share with you happened again before we buried Veronica. So again, bear with me because I'm going to backpedal. But we had a service for Veronica, a memorial service for Veronica at her school. And one of my coworkers, she asked me if she could organize this for me. And I said, sure. That's great. So she got all of my coworkers, everyone at the at our office to get together, and we went to Veronica's elementary school, which wasn't far from the house, oddly enough. And when you walked in to I think it was the auditorium, the ceiling was covered with bright yellow helium balloons. It was just beautiful. And all the kids were there. And Veronica's urn was on this table. And it was just covered in flowers, beautiful floral arrangements. In fact, I don't know that very many people actually saw the urn. There was that many flowers. And they had this huge projection, a screen projection of Veronica's face. It was on the wall. It was beautiful to see. And the children sang songs. And they talked about Veronica. And I remember a couple of things from that day. I remember my boss, the director of our office, I remember shaking his hand and his wife's hand. And I remember his wife, she was hugging me, offering me her condolences. And I remember the director of our office, he shook my hand and very stoically said, "Be strong." And I remember saying, "Yes, sir." So I was trying to be strong. I was trying to be strong for everybody. And inside I was screaming. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to be anywhere. But children can, I mentioned before, in the last video about how mean children can be, but they can also be gracious and beautiful and comforting. And I remember these 3 little girls came up to me and they wanted to talk about Veronica. They wanted to offer their condolences to me about Veronica. And one of the girls, I guess she was the designated leader of the little group. She spoke first, and the other 2 just nodded their head enthusiastically. But she went on to say how much they love Veronica. They love playing with her, and how they used to protect her when other kids would want to bully her, give her a hard time, they would protect her. And they were, I could tell the girl was, this was something she had practiced, and she was trying to reach a little bit for what she thought might be the appropriate things to say. But she told us about how she and Veronica used to play all the time. And I remember telling them, thank you so much. Thank you for that. And the school, they planted a tree for Veronica. And I remember that the school was brand new. And so everything had that fresh smell, about it. And I remember there was as sad as it was for me, there was also this incredible energy. It was the energy of young people, who are, they haven't been beaten down by life yet. They don't know this is quote unquote how you're supposed to act. All they know is, how things are right now. And they sang the songs, they shared, their stories, and I enjoyed the moment. I actually did. Because mentally it was an opportunity for me to breathe. I could breathe. And perhaps that's what this was all about. Perhaps that's what grief is about, is an opportunity for you to let go and breathe and not have to hold things in like you think you're supposed to. Like my boss had said, be strong. It didn't do me any good. Being strong never did anything for me, except make me physically sick, make me have convinced I was having ulcers. That wasn't the case, but I sure felt like it. For years I had been living with my stomach churning from acid, living off cigarettes and coffee. So when this opportunity came about for me to be able to just smile, genuinely smile about all of this, and let it go, and appreciate the fact that these children were doing something from their heart for one of their own, it made me happy. I felt very happy about it. So again, and I'm sorry because I said I was backpedaling and going back and forth. So that was that day. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we buried Veronica. And the thing is, for people, they bury someone, and in their mind, that represents the closure. Well, I take it back. That in everyone else's mind who isn't directly related to that person, that's the closure. They're like, oh, okay, well, at least they had a good life. At least they did, this, and they were able to make this mark on their life, and this is their legacy. And people say things to make themselves feel better. And I remember I had gone to work, and one of my co-workers had left a pamphlet at my desk. It was It was a simple pamphlet that, a simple three-page pamphlet that said, "This is what happens when you die." It was supposed to be a comfort for me to know this is what was going to happen to Veronica now. I couldn't have been more angry in my life. I'm a religious man. I love God. I love my faith. But I thought to myself, how dare anyone presume to tell me that this is what's going to happen now? It didn't help. But you know what? I didn't act upon it either. I let it fume. I let it stay inside me. I never said a word about it. I never acknowledged the brochure from my coworker. I never said anything about it. I just let it go. But inside I was seething. I considered it an insult. I wanted my daughter. I wanted her back. I wanted her here. I don't need to know the play-by-play. I don't need to know, well, this is what's going to happen and you should feel better knowing that. Knowing this stuff wasn't going to bring my daughter back. So at that point, I really began to let go. I was doing my work. I mean, it needed to be done. You know, if anything, my parents taught me is to have a strong work ethic. So I was doing what I needed to do. But I didn't care. And my coworkers were trying to be supportive for me, but they didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. More than anything else, they just kind of kept out of my way. And I would just come in, work, barely say anything, and just go home. And I remember one particular night, I went home. I'd stopped and got some Chinese food. And I had, it was raining. And I had gone home, empty house, all alone in there. And I started picking at this Chinese food while watching TV. And I really wasn't hungry. The only reason I got it is because I thought it was something that I needed to do. I had a mixed drink. And even that, I was just sort of picking, you know, sipping at it. And I remember I was listening to the rain. And there was something about the rain that just, it caught my ear. And without even really thinking about it, I stood up and I walked to the door, the front door of the house, and I flung it wide open. And I could see the little tiny leaves from the bushes in the front yard swirling around from the wind. And I looked up at the sky, and it just filled with these ominous dark clouds. And now it was sunset, and the sun was quickly sinking below the horizon. It was just these huge black clouds. And then there was the lightning. The lightning was amazing. I was transfixed. I just stumbled forward out onto the porch, out onto the sidewalk, and looking up at these clouds. and the lightning would flash inside these clouds, and they would illuminate the whole cloud. It was beautiful. It was like looking at the inside of a basilica or a cathedral. I was transfixed by it. And I felt the rain. I felt the rainfall. I felt it on my face and on my shirt and my tie. And I couldn't help but giggle as I stood in the rain, as it was being soaked, all my clothes soaked to the skin in this rain. And I looked out at the street, and I could see the little puddles, little eddies of water swirling in the street, just strolling down the street. And the lights in the houses, there was automatically turning on because then now it was getting dark. And I stood there and I looked up at the clouds and I thought to myself, that's it. I've had enough. And I went back inside, and the next day I took all of my suits, all of my dress shirts, all of my ties, and I threw them in a garbage bag, and I donated them. I went to one of those donation spots, the big metal containers where you drop off donations. And I took all those work clothes and I just threw them in the big box. And I thought to myself, why not? I'm not going to need these clothes anymore. It really doesn't matter. And again, I was just fine with that. It just made perfect sense to me. And to some people, they'd say, there's clearly something wrong with Paul, because this isn't normal. You don't do these things. It's not normal to do these things. Well, that may be the case, but it sure seemed normal to me. So again, I took all my stuff, decided that was enough. And you know what? The thing is, at work, there were changes going on. We were getting we were being bought out. At first, it was supposed to be, the idea we were told was that it was a partnership, but with another company, and there was going to be a merger. Well, talk changes, of course. Things happen, and the idea of the partnership became a corporate takeover. We had been told, yeah, don't worry, everyone is going to be just fine, but we're going to have a new company coming in, and they're going to take over. And at first, I was fine with it. There was new bosses, new people. And I was really trying to be a part of it. I thought, be a good sport. But again, everyone was, adjusting to this new life, this new corporate life, these new bosses. And the bosses were coming in and they were making changes. And everyone wondered what was going to happen. So we'll talk about that one later. But it's really important for you to hear that story too. We'll talk again.